Hey everyone, welcome to the 359th episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode is brought to you by patrons Kimberly DiVincenzo and Victor Prado. Thanks for being patrons. I'm Oren Kaplan.
And I'm Matt Enlow. Today, it's an old school Matt and Oren episode. We're talking about the whole process of booking that big old commercial job of your dreams. We're going step by step through the process of getting the job, actually shooting the job, and then what you do afterwards. Oren and I are both coming hot off of pretty cool celebrity-driven jobs, and we thought, oh, it's been a minute since we've really done a step-by-step breakdown. And we'll talk a lot about our process, how we go the extra mile, the way that things have changed for us over the years. And I would say, looking at our outline, literally every single thing has evolved since the last time we talked about this.
Yeah, and I think the two projects we're speaking about specifically here kind of involve celebrity talent, and I think that adds another element to what makes this interesting. I think it can also apply to TV, short films, whatever your project is.
I shot with an old DP pal, Andy Riz, who's been on the show actually, and it does mostly television. And when we were working on this job, he was like, "Oh, I love commercials. There's so much more previs," and it was a standard amount of previs. Right. Like I think you maybe go, and not maybe, I know you go a level deeper in terms of like modeling things in 3D and yada, yada, yada. Like I was shooting video boards and they were very thorough and specific, but he was like, "Oh, wow." And I was like, "Yeah, man, you're working on big TV shows." But the luxury of putting so much energy into 30 seconds is great. It's one of the special things about commercials. So I can't wait to talk to you about every single aspect of it.
Well, before we dive into our step-by-step process on commercials, I've been dying to know, Matt, what have you been working on lately?
Yeah, man. I wanted to talk to you because we both have pretty big writing projects. I am deep in yet another rewrite on my feature. I brought on some new producers. They had some really great notes. But it kind of turned into open heart surgery. It was really like it's a pretty hefty rewrite, which is exciting and good. And I feel like my muscles had kind of atrophied over the years, and I'm finally feeling good about the output, really the process, which is what I wanted to talk to you about. Because I've started years ago, I would wake up really early. Now I have a baby. And so I'm trying to wake up at 5 every morning to get in a real session before the baby is up and running, so that I know that I've gotten a meaningful writing session in. And maybe I can squeeze one in at night or during a nap or whatever. But like my mentality is always like, okay, if you get your creativity out of the way, then you can spend your day housekeeping, so to speak, or work, like pitching on jobs, taking meetings, all of that stuff. And you have a podcast that you have to write. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious to know about how that is going and what your process has been. How are you regimenting that whole writing process?
Overall, it's the biggest problem right now is there is no process and no discipline. I have the advantage that I have a co-writer, so I have a teammate. And I'd say the work that is easy to do is to just call her on the phone and just talk. Just say, "Hey, I had this idea. Hey, I saw this thing. Hey, I read this article. Hey, what if we did this thing?" Or I was driving, or my kid said that.
The brainstormy part. Yeah.
And right now we're working on the outline. I think you're working on the script itself, right? Like you're in final draft or whatever.
I'm kind of like re-outlining again. That's how gnarly in terms of cracking it open. Mostly the first half, but yeah, it's
Yeah, the outline is
the
like...
The sweater has unraveled, so to speak.
Right. On one hand, it's like, you're like, oh, little low pressure because I don't need to know everything. I'm like, oh, something happens here. They get in a fight and she goes outside and she sees this thing, which she runs back in, or this happened. Or
you understand the beats and the specifics you'll get into next.
Yeah, but then sometimes just sitting down and writing the specifics gives you such great ideas for the broader picture. So we're, right now, our process... All of last week, I just scheduled like 10 a.m. to like 1 p.m. We're just going to be working on it. We have a Google Doc.
For listeners at home, it's 11 right now as we're recording this.
Yeah, that was last week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This week has been a little rougher because I've been doing other things. Well, this spot that we're going to talk about came out like on Thursday. And so I've kind of been trying to promote it a little bit. And, you know, anytime a news article comes up or something, it's like very distracting and much easier for me to read that news article than to figure out what our show's about. So we're developing this show at Temple Hill. And so we have a call on every Thursday with Pete Harris, our guy there. And basically our job is just to tell him where we're at and what's happening. And oddly enough, we don't have like a super solid deadline. But we have been paid. I'm sure I talked about this before, but it's a scripted podcast about a YA story. And our deal remember we had the episode where I asked you if I should get a lawyer or not. And we ended up going lawyerless. I'm sure our deal is not good at all. But ultimately, it's 3 steps. The first step is we have to turn in an outline and a synopsis, and they're paying us for that. And then once they approve that, we write the pilot. And once they approve that, we get the 11 next episodes. So it's going to be 12 20-minute episodes.
Have I given you this piece of advice that you tell me after I give it to you, and then you'll know. Write quickly. And the reason why is that like a handful of my shows...
Oh, yes.
I sold, and then the executive gets fired or the branch of the company gets shut down. I'm sure that like Temple Hill and Audible are around, but like things do change up for sure. Executives move places, all that stuff. And if you don't, you know, those open-ended deadlines, sometimes they can...
no, for sure. I'm scared of... I was like, can we have a deadline? And our guy was like... I thought it would be better if you can like do it on your own, like do however much time you need. And I'm like, I don't think that's how my brain works.
Well, and also I think they're trying to like, they know that the amount of money that you have perhaps doesn't sustain you in its entirety. Right? Like no one's expecting you to live a year on the amount of money that you made, basically. So
well, that's what I've been talking
there's some flexibility to it.
Yeah, Julie. Let's say you get $10,000, just to throw out a random whole number. If you take 10 weeks to write something, then you get $1,000 a week. If you take 2 weeks to write it, then you got $5,000 a week. And maybe it's worth it doing it in 2 weeks. Just to block everything else out and just do it in those 2 weeks, you know, and then we get some notes and then you do whatever. So,
well, and that brings me back to my initial point that like, unfortunately, writing for 5 hours straight is less good than writing for 1 hour every morning 5 days in a row,
right?
At least for me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, like they don't add up to the same output,
right? No, I find that if we meet up for 5 hours versus 2 hours, like the 5 hour meeting, we chit chat for 3 hours and then get some writing done for 2 hours.
Sure.
And the 3 hour meeting, we chit chat for 1 hour and then get writing done. So
and
it's
look,
the same amount of writing, no matter how many hours we meet.
And I think it is important to be realistic about what your process is. Do you know what I mean? Like when I wake up at 5, I'm not typing at 5:05.
Right. You're typing on your coffee maker.
Yeah, exactly.
What bean grind do you want?
So my goal actually is 5:30 is to be hands on the keyboard.
Yeah.
Which is
but when does your kid wake up?
Dude, that's the bummer. Is that like she's transitioning from 2 naps to 1 nap, and so depending on our luck, she can wake up anywhere between 4 and 7:30.
Yeah, that's why I stopped doing working in the morning, because I would get so into it would work, you know, it would take me like 30 minutes, 45 minutes to get into my flow, and then
you get
5
that
minutes
coffee
later
going, and then you'd hear the cry.
Yeah. And you know, my wife's sleeping, so it's like, am I just going to keep sitting here while the baby's crying and it just didn't work for me.
But that's why I've been going for 5, because that feels relatively safe. Right. I did have a 4 a.m. wake up over the weekend, but for the most part, it's been working out okay. But it's like going to the gym. You just got to keep doing it. Do you know what I mean?
I find when we force ourselves to do things, so kind of our process now is we'll get on the phone, we'll talk for 2 hours. Usually at least 50% of it has to do with like what's happening in our lives and kids and things and stuff we read or stuff we watched or movies. And then we will open up, we have a Google Doc that has the outline in it. 12 episodes, and I'm trying to kind of find a theme for each episode. You know, this one's about transformation. This one's about rejection. This one is about discovery, whatever. And then basically just try to get one word out about the episode that kind of guides us. And we have, you know, these scenes and these set pieces that we're really excited about that we kind of distribute around the outline. Around.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times like, I don't know what's going to happen here. What's going to happen? Like, it just seems big. Like, are we spending too much time on this like C plot when we should be spending more time? But then as soon as I'm like, here, I'm just going to write, you know, the bad version or whatever. Okay. She walks in, she sees that Derek's doing this, and she accidentally drops her pills. He turns around and he sees that she's got these drugs or whatever. Like, literally, it can just be the worst scene, but then I'll write it, and then Julie's like, I don't like that. And she'll go in and she'll rewrite it. And then I'll be like, what if we do that? So it's just like literally putting the stuff down makes such a difference. And it helps to do that separately. So we'll do it for like an hour together, and then she'll go and write on it, and then I'll go and write on it. And then again, we'll just start again the next day. So it's going, but we're sometimes, you know, because we don't have a super set schedule, and we have all these other kind of jobs and family events going on at the same time, it's tricky. And because the money, like you said, isn't, you know, I'm not going to live off of, you know,
whatever the
amount literally. And just to give you an idea of like how the money breaks up, it's like if you are developing with a company and you sell to another company, then you have to split the money with the company you're developing with. And then if you have a co-writer or something, you have to split the money with them. So,
so even if you
sold something, for $500,000, over the course of 3 steps, so you're getting like, you know, $200,000 a step, you're ultimately getting like, you know, 10 grand, 20 grand or something, which in LA, you can't quit your job and live and support a family in a house off 20 grand for 3 months. Right. So you have to be kind of hustling on other jobs. Anyhow, it's fun, but it's cool. It's awesome to be like writing a show and to know that someone is excited to read it. You know, that's the hardest part to me about writing, is knowing that no one is going to want to read it. You know, unless I force them to.
Boy, ain't that the truth? Well, awesome, man. I can't wait to hear more about the show. Congratulations again. And keep us updated on your process.
Oh, you too. I hope you have many sleepful nights from your baby, so that you get stuff done.
Thanks, man. Yeah, no, it's been reinvigorating, and you know, I think our careers were founded on self-generation. Right. You know what I mean? And I think that we've talked about this many times, but like drifting away from that and moving towards things that are
commissioned,
kind of severs a big part of our business, basically, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm happy to be back into it.
I do these breakdown videos on Instagram about my work, and I feel like that is a little bit of me getting to make a video about what I've done, or me getting to make a post or a graphic or something. It's like, it's still about a commissioned job, but I feel like it's a little bit of a self-generation and a little bit a part of me.
100% it is. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I like that point of like self-generation can be a social media post. It can be a short film. It can be, you know,
like a hilarious family video that you made and edited in a funny way.
Yeah. Or a pilot or a TV show or a movie. Yeah.
Yeah, or an event that you put on.
Yeah, sure. Good point. I like that. Awesome. Well, before we hop into our step-by-step breakdown of working with celebrity-driven commercials, I'd like to remind you all to go to patreon.com/justshootitpod, the place where you can throw us a few bucks to show your support for our show. It's a labor of love. We have some bills to pay on this show, and you committing a few dollars every month keeps us going in a very, very literal way.
Yeah. Honestly, yesterday we were doing some accounting, and we're like, the Patreon is basically why this show can exist.
What keeps us going. Yeah, 100%.
So we really appreciate it. Patreon.com/JustShootItPod. And if you do even 1 month at the $20 level, you will get a Just Shoot It hat sent to your home from my home. Anyhow, Patreon.com/JustShootItPod. Thank you so much. Let's go on with the show.
All right.
So I posted a spot that I recently came out, and a listener of ours named David Patterson commented on my post and he said, "Is this discussed in your podcast? It would be cool to hear your process from script through post." So Matt and I, who both had kind of similar shoots recently, they're both celebrity-driven comedy spots that we had to get into the mix for, meaning people had to think of us as potential directors for these jobs. Then we had to pitch on them, convince people to hire us. Then we had to work on the creative, adjust the scripts, adjust everything to make sense for the actors, for the location, for everything. It's a very involved job. And then we had to shoot, we had to prepare, we had to shoot, and we had to go through post-production. And now my spot has come out, your spot is coming out in March, and we can talk a little bit about kind of the things that I did and the things that you're planning on doing.
Yeah, 100%. So starting with hearing about the job.
Yeah.
That's step one. Just even being in the loop enough to know that it's happening is tricky, and I think is something that evolves over time.
Yeah, and I think your story for your spot is probably more interesting than mine because mine is really quick. I'm signed with a production company, Great Guns, last year, and I had done one job with them, Serve Pro, in May, and then we pitched on a couple other jobs, and we didn't get them. And then this one, I was in New York working on another job that I got through some other company, and they were like, "Hey, Oren, do you have some time to get on the phone with these two creatives to talk about this potential PSA?" And it was like right in the middle of my shoot, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll be in a hotel, for a couple hours at this time. Let's do it." And that's it. So it came kind of a fairly traditional way.
And mine honestly actually isn't that far from that. The main difference being that the producer who reached out to me, we had tried to work together for a few other jobs. He had found my stuff online basically and knew that I had like a decent track record with a handful of great celebrities and was like, "Hey, would you be interested in doing this comedy spot?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure."
How did he find your stuff online? Do you know?
I asked him maybe once or twice, and he's just like research. I think he honestly doesn't remember.
Yeah, they all surprisingly that's the most common
like
answer
Instagram video shots.
Yeah,
Facebook, something like that. Maybe somebody said, "Oh, Matt's work is good."
Right.
Any combination of that list is valid, though, and certainly I think we have both found work through all of those avenues.
Yeah.
Do you ever post on LinkedIn? You post on LinkedIn,
I
right?
literally just started like a couple weeks ago because that's where all the ad agency folks are, but I never really did anything there. But yeah, so I cannot stress enough how important it is to have a website with your work. If you're rep by a production company, to make sure they obviously have you on their company with your best spots. But if you're not, just posting on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, your work, whenever you make something new, post about it and write why you're excited about it. Because that's like literally if your only friends on Instagram are the people from your town in the suburbs of Michigan, it will eventually somehow get to someone that can hire you for a job. Posting and then once you have the post, that's not all you need, right? Then you need someone to say, "Oh, I have a video thing. What about this person, Matt Enlow?" Then they need somewhere to go to see your bio and see some other work samples.
Follow through on it. Yeah.
That's and once you get famous, if you're like a Mike Mills or Scorsese or even a Paul Briganti, you don't necessarily need a website because people know what your flavor is, and then they will hire you for that.
And I think maybe your reps are doing more of that work, basically. But yeah, that's hearing about the job is step one for sure.
Right. So then the next part is pitching on the job, obviously. So usually, right, oftentimes in the commercial world, they will choose 3 directors and 3 companies. Each director is with a company. But sometimes it can be you own the company. I mean, many directors own their own production companies. I'm sure a lot of listeners of ours that are even newer in the business, like, hey, they've produced things and directed them. So at some point, you get to be on this list, usually of 3, sometimes up to 5 or even 10 people, and sometimes as little as 1 or 2. But the traditional number is that 3 directors are going to meet with the people that created the ad campaign, whether it's the company or an ad agency, and we have to convince them why they should pick us over the other 2 people. And of course, there's the company part, and there's the budget part, and then there's the creative part. And the thing that I've found, I'm sure you would agree, is the most important by far is the creative part. If you can get them super stoked,
excited about it, yeah,
about you and how you're gonna do this, and the passion and cleverness and ingenuity and authenticity you bring to this specific project, the budget, they'll find a way to
all
make
that
it work.
stuff. Yeah, floats away. I don't know if I told you this, but on this last job, I tend to be really execution focused.
Yeah.
I'm like, this
Well,
is
you
how
used
we
to
do
be,
this. This is how I do
a
that.
guillotine operator back in the day, right?
Yeah. And then I moved to the electric chair, and now it's just all injections, and I've lost interest in it.
I'm shocked.
Just really like, this is how we're gonna do this great creative that you put in front of me.
Right.
Was my take on this, and
here's how I'm gonna add to it. Here's my spin
I'm gonna
on
add
your
to it,
idea
for sure. But I wasn't leaning on the spin as much as I should have, and I got off the call, and I'm good in the room. I'm good at pitching. I was keeping people engaged, and the producer was like, "Hey, we need to talk about ideas more. Like you were too execution oriented." And we got back on the phone with the agency to be like, "Hey, after this conversation, I just got flooded with ideas. I would love to talk to you more about X, Y, and Z." And that was the call that sealed the deal for me, for sure.
And was that before the treatment or after the treatment?
That was after the treatment. No,
I think it was before, right?
No, it was before.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Yeah.
Because we talked about this when that happened. I talked to you about how usually there's two parts to pitching on a job. There's hearing about the job, and then there's from the people whose idea it is, and then you think about it, work on it for a couple of days, and then you come back to them and you say, okay, here's my plan. This is how I would shoot it. And Jordan Brady talks about this on his podcast, and a lot of veteran commercial people know this, but a lot of newer people don't realize that first call, that first time when you hear about the job, is just as important, and sometimes even more important than when you tell them what your plan is.
More important, I would say. Yeah. And that, coming with ideas and coming with your excitement and really being kind of blue sky, but then also diagnosing the things that they're worried about, right? So in this case, the agency had some really cool stuff that we just wouldn't be able to shoot with the amount of time that we had. And they asked me point blank, could we do this? And I threw out a couple different ideas for ways to make it work, that ultimately didn't even end up in the spots, like the creative shifted, but like, oh, here's how I'm problem solving. That's where execution comes in, of like, I'm going to bring your creative to life. And yes, my hands are safe hands, and we have a lot of different ways to make this work together. Was the takeaway that they had.
Yeah, I've evolved my pitches to have very little execution in them, aside from like if there's a new technique, like, oh, we're gonna do this cool effect, I'm gonna show you how, or I'll reference like, did you guys see that the Stallone Super Bowl shot, Paramount Plus, where he's hanging on the nose and he gets sneezed off of that gave me this idea of like people sneezing and everyone around them flying all over the place or whatever. And I know this amazing stunt person that can like rig this for us, like on our budget, like I think that execution based, but I wouldn't be like, the way we do it is like we put the trusses, we got it, like I wouldn't get into
you do. Yeah.
Any of the
eyes
specifics.
glaze over for sure.
Yeah. More just about how cool would it be if we're on set and people are flying with wires all over the house. I'm trying to lead with like excitement and passion. And
that's right.
And also kind of throwing away like, yeah, we'll shoot like Alexa or something, and it'll be awesome. You need vertical also? Yeah, we'll shoot open gate. I've done it a million times before. It'll be easy. And I kind of throw it away and don't explain what that means.
Don't say open gate. Yeah.
Well, I'll kind of make it seem like, oh, we all know the technical stuff, but let's talk about the creative stuff.
Yeah.
Let's focus.
That's right.
But for my job, since it's out, I can probably be a little more specific. So my job was a PSA with Rebel Wilson, where she's it's about concussion awareness. Rebel Wilson had a concussion a couple years ago, just like slipping on some grass, even though she does all these like action movies and crazy stunts. So the premise of my commercial or my PSA is that Rebel Wilson is saying, I don't know why people think I'm so rebellious. I'm perfectly well behaved. And as she's saying this, she's walking around an action movie set, like causing all this chaos. And she said, but finally she admits, like, there actually is one rebellious thing I did, which is when I hit my head unlike most people, I went to the doctor to get it checked, and it's good I did because I had a concussion. So it's basically the conceit of the spot is Rebel Wilson unintentionally being rebellious on this action movie set, right? And so when I had my first call with the creatives, they had given me the script. It had all these like really funny small moments. Like she goes to the craft service table and she switches the habanero sauce with the mild sauce. You know, she picks up a stack of cue cards and rearranges them, and kind of like a little more headier, thinky comedy, which I love. Obviously, I feel like you and I have probably like really enjoy that kind of clever.
Yeah,
idea
I think
stuff.
I had pitched moving a charcuterie plate into the sun.
That was a really good one. Yeah, Matt's idea, because I called some director friends and some comedy people and tried to riff on some ideas, and yeah, Matt was like, "Oh, that's the most horrible thing you could do is move like the cheese plate into the sun."
Yeah, and you know, spoiler alert, it didn't make it into the cut, but like everything.
But there is a charcuterie board in there.
Oh, that's good. That's right.
Yeah.
But you moved from thinky pieces into visual gags.
Well, one thing that they had said on that first call, which is potentially why I got this job, is they said, originally we were going to have her. There's a scene where she picks up, someone hands her a mermaid costume, and she says, "I'm just like everyone else. I put my pants on one leg at a time." And then she holds up the mermaid costume, and she's like, "Oh, there's only one leg," which is a really good joke. But they were like, originally we were going to say fire-resistant pants one leg at a time, and she puts them on, and somebody lights her on fire. They're like, but we know like budget and time-wise, we only have Rebel Wilson for 7 hours. She has to do like an interview with Good Morning America in the middle of it. Like, there's no way we can get that done. But in my mind, I was like, oh, well, we can't get that done. But if flamethrower is on the table, what if she picks up a flamethrower and shoots the flame instead of catching on fire? We can do the flame in post. So it started making me think like, ooh, what are these action things? And you and I talked about the charcuterie board, and then our friend Blake was like, what if she takes the knife from the charcuterie board and like throws it across the set or something? And so I was like, ooh, that's awesome. And even when I pitched the job, I like had my laptop and I like showed them like the Robert Rodriguez style whip pan of like when you throw a knife. And I think that stuff really won the job for me.
Yeah, that's also. Have you the taxi driver move? It's one better than the whip pan.
No.
So it's so good. It's a collapsible knife on one side. They stab your hand, and then you cut to the reverse where the blade is rigged through the hand. So visceral, so good, man.
Yeah. Why is it? Oh, is that how they did it in Taxi Driver?
That's how they did it in Taxi Driver.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah,
it's just like a cheap toy knife, basically cut to the reverse. Oh,
I mean, when you can do like a Robert Rodriguez or like one of these easy practical gags in a commercial or something, it's so fun. And you get people.
I think they do it in Bad Taste, the Peter Jackson movie as well. It's whip pan into like just machete in someone's head.
Right. Yeah. And that's when you kind of start getting your creative like people that you're working with, like thinking like, oh, look at these cool ideas of like something so effective that's not crazy expensive or out of scope. Obviously like a machete in someone's head might be a little off brand for a PSA about concussion awareness. And even that, like in the beginning, I had ideas of like, oh, what if like people in the background are getting bonked in the head and stuff. I'm like, I don't know. Seems like in bad taste. Anyway, but that was, I think I talked about that pitch actually on this podcast because I had done like 10 jumping jacks and like listened to like some hype music on Spotify right before that pitch. Yeah. And when I got the job, they told me the reason we chose you is because you were just so insanely excited about this. And
well, and it's funny because, and I think I maybe talked about this as well. I pitched my job right after you had told that story. And I was like, well, I'm not a jumping jacks guy necessarily, but
neither am I.
But
that's the whole point is to take you out of your
just get excited,
your normal
get into it.
Yeah.
But I was like, how can I show them my enthusiasm? And I had done all of these.
You wore a non-black shirt.
I wore a
gray, a lighter shade of gray.
Yeah. I wear a lot of Hawaiian shirts too, Oren.
I'm kidding.
I had photoshopped all these things, and then the morning of the pitch, I found out that the celebrity that we thought we were all pitching on had changed. Yeah. And we were going to somebody new, and I talked to the agency afterwards. I quickly, because I had built all these Photoshop files already, I like in the 10 minutes between pitching and not because it was a Google Slides situation, I changed the cover slide in particular and came in excited for that person. And I found out later they were like, oh, it really lifted our spirits.
Right.
Because like they had one idea in mind that they'd been talking about for a long time. And now it was a totally new idea. And I embraced that new idea.
And pivoted like super fast.
And pivoted and showed them a way that it could be better.
Yeah.
Even.
It's like judo.
Yeah.
You took the weight and just redirected it.
I just rolled my shoulder into
a new direction.
The new direction of expensive talent. But you know, that was the equivalent of me doing jumping jacks. I was like, okay, let's get into Photoshop. Let's do this really quick. That'll be really fun. That'll show them I'm going the extra mile,
right,
to make this happen.
Yeah. And so with both of our jobs, once we got the jobs, for me it was like pretty exciting. The production company I'm with, they do this thing where they will like get everyone on the phone, like the reps and all the assistants, everyone head of production, and they'll call me and they'll be like, hey, Oren, about that job, yeah, we're really sorry to tell you that you better pack your bags because you're going to Los Angeles. They didn't say that obviously, but they get hyped, you know, when you get like a good job. So I think they called me, nice. And then we
I kind of had the opposite where I just got a text that was like, hey, I think you might be the guy.
Oh, yeah. But you get all those and then you don't get, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. I was like, okay, well, fingers crossed. And then slowly it took a long time for them to be like, yes, you are.
Right. Because your job was contingent on the talent attaching.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And a lot of times with celebrities, this has happened to me multiple times, is they will have an opinion on the director. And many times they want to work with directors that they've worked with before.
Well, and also, this is literally happening to me right now. I signed on to a celebrity job, really excited about it, was going to shoot in a week. And then celebrity backed out and they were kind of like, okay, well, this is on hold until we find the new person who's right.
Right.
And like agencies can get really attached to the idea that, you know, if it's not Steve Zahn, then what are we even doing?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, the love a Zahn spot.
I do love Steve Zahn, actually. I would truly be excited.
Yeah, and they have no allegiance. You could have worked your butt off to get the job, and you get it, and then the celebrity changes, and then they have no allegiance to you. They're kind of starting from square one.
Yeah. So we'll see. Fingers crossed.
I got a job that you had pitched on, and then everything changed.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yes.
You pitched on it, and then the whole job totally went away, and like literally half the staff at the company changed, and then they just kind of went out to new people. Like, and so it's like you can basically be so close to getting the job, and then one factor changes, and you're completely out. So, I guess that goes back to your note about writing fast. Like,
yeah, truly. Yeah.
Like
I should have repitched on that thing.
So
you've got the job.
You got the job. Now you got to figure out.
Celebrity said, yes, Oren is okay by me.
Yeah, which, by the way, full disclosure, I was not Rebel Wilson's pick. I think I've told you that before.
Don't blame her. Yeah.
But I don't know I honestly have no idea who the other two directors were that I was up against, but I think she chose one of the other ones. And I think the creative team really liked me, but the client really like I don't know, we had like a good rapport on that second call, and they're like, we like Oren, he seems into this, and we are like excited to work with him. So Rebel, are you okay with us moving with our selection instead? And I think at some point she's like, yeah, whatever.
That's fine. Yeah, I mean, good on that team though, right? And I think the opposite has happened to both of us as well.
Oh yeah, I had this. I mean, I must have spent like a month pitching on this like Leslie Jones job, and then it changed to Tracy Ellis Ross or something. But anyway, I kept redoing my pitch, keep doing and then at the end, whoever ended up booking it was just like, yeah,
I had worked with them before.
Yeah, I want to work with this other director, and so anyhow, you win some, you lose more, probably. But when you win them, it's good.
It's a numbers game. Yeah.
And so
how do you figure out the creative then? Right, like things have been shifting.
Right. So for me, it always starts with a location. Like let's figure out like shoot date, location, right? because that's going to dictate a lot, unless you're doing like a stage shoot or green screen or something like that's going to dictate a lot of like what you had in the script if that's going to work. I mean, I think for yours, which always kind of took place in like a home and a store.
Well, yeah. So
street,
mine was
right?
mine was a home, a store, and a street. But a grocery store in particular, grocery stores are tricky because
it's hard to shut them down.
It's hard to shut them down, and if they're a Kroger, Ralph's, any of those big conglomerate ones, they're especially complicated.
Yeah. Also, by the way, anywhere you point your camera is like a bazillion trademarked logos.
Yeah.
That
so
potentially
not
are competing with what you're marketing.
It was that this job was big, but I don't know how many tens of thousands of dollars we spent on making a grocery store look like a grocery store. So as a result, everything had to be reskinned. So we literally we bought, I don't know how much food, and like repackaged everything, like redesigned everything.
Right.
We have a
your
spreadsheet
spot is kind of about packaging. Yeah.
It's about packaging. Yeah. So like,
and so did that creative change? Like, was that
was the thing that was locked in first and foremost, and so everything else kind of had to revolve around that. So the house that we needed to shoot at needed to be convenient to the grocery store because it was 2 spots each day for 2 days, so 4 spots total. But like, we knew we had a company move. If the company move was too far away, then we're burning time. Again, celebrity talent, they're on the clock, so like every
so this is the point where you're
spending,
starting to actually figure out if production makes sense for the insane ideas you're pitching.
Right, exactly, yeah. And luckily, you're able to talk to the agency. And in this case, I was able to really collaborate with the agency, and they were production savvy enough to understand why I was saying the things I was saying or pitching the things. And it was a very open dialogue back and forth of how to make this work and how to pitch things that made sense for the production.
Right. And I remember you used to have like a bicycle scene where your talent's riding on a bike, and it's in the final thing you didn't have that. So were there a lot of things like that where you had kind of a setup for a context, for your character, and then you ended up changing it because of either who you booked or how the complications of shooting it?
Yeah. So that was the main thing that changed, actually. And it was because the original idea was much more theatrical. And so rather than literally having someone riding a bicycle, I'd pitched like something that felt like Poor Man's Process or green screen, or kind of actually not unlike the gag that's the opening shot of your Rebel Wilson spot, where it's like it's clear that we are on a green screen, and that's kind of the joke, But when the talent changed, the theatricality sort of went away, and it became much more cut and dry and a different tone, and
kind of like grounded vibe. And yeah,
yeah. Exactly.
Though it's still heightened, but kind of heightened in a different direction.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
More personality driven than like musical driven.
Because, the big picture, the reason that a brand is hiring a celebrity is not because they're necessarily incredibly better than if you had just found a nice, like very good SAG actor who's just not famous. It's that you're adding their persona on top of it. So it's like
you're borrowing up from their IP of who they are.
Right, exactly. So, like, how would they say this, or how, does this make sense in their mouths? Like, and the star becomes the beacon from which the North Star, from which everything kind of emanates out. So, like, the color palette, everything is based off of what celebrity you're working with.
Right, and you're also studying like everything you've ever seen: their movies, their shows, their commercials, their interviews, and you're trying to write your dialogue in a way that they would say it, right?
100%.
Because that's the value that they're bringing is them. Like there's this, probably my favorite Super Bowl spot was this Adam Driver Squarespace one. Did you see that one?
It's great.
A website for making websites. It's on nobody else's top Super Bowl list other than mine, but I just...
Oh, is that true? No, I thought it was great.
I just loved it. It was kind of simple and cool VFX. But, Adam Driver has got a like serious brooding thing. So when he's doing this like very serious stuff that's kind of like hilarious, but also serious, you get like a really nice juxtaposition and
tongue in cheek sort of vibe.
Yeah. So with my shoot, you know, basically I pitched a bunch. It came with a bunch of funny gags built into it. I had pitched a bunch of additional funny gags, and then we sent it to Rebel, and she nixed 2 of our gags. I had this thing where she like lets this tarantula out of a crate, like on the props table, and then I had like some kind of crazy big stunt at the end.
Were you gonna do the tarantula practically, or
Yeah.
Yeah.
But part of the idea of
yeah.
the tarantula was that we could shoot it without her, because we just knew we had her for so limited time. We could just have the cage there, and then we cut to like an insert. And then I love the idea that this tarantula crawls out of this cage, and then at the end, I was going to have her do this like a crazy like 30-foot jump off a building onto one of those like inflatable pads. And at the end, the tarantula is like crawling towards her as we like fade out, you know?
A Home Alone shot.
Yeah. So we ended up, she didn't, I don't know, I never quite understood why she didn't like the tarantula, but we replaced it with this knife throw, this charcuterie board knife throw. And then the end, we just didn't have time. And there were some other issues with like the fall. So we ended up with this like jetpack idea.
I was going to say the fall is your bicycle, where it's just like, boy, this is a lot of time. A fall takes a good couple hours. I've never done one.
Yeah, and you need everything a stunt double.
Anytime I've worked with stunts, it's just, you know, you have to take the time to do it safely.
Yeah,
you know?
Actually, shout out to our previous guest, Sambo Steve Kupfer, who when I was pitching on this job, I called him and I was like, hey, how much does this cost? Is this like $2,000? $20,000 or $200,000 thing to do it safely with a SAG actor, like on a, you know, back lot, like to do it the legit way that a movie would do it. And he was super helpful, and he's like, I think we got like 10 grand. We got this, a rigger, a this. Like he was super helpful, and he even like connected me with the stunt coordinator. But when that stunt got cut, we ended up.
And just to clarify, you weren't looking for a quote. You just need to know the ballpark, right? Like sometimes we're decoupled from knowing how much things cost, you know? And so if you say, hey, I want to do this fall, or hey, I need a techno crane for this, or whatever, knowing if you're asking for $1,000 or $50,000 is important, because
yes. And I already knew, remember, this is coming off of them saying we wanted to do this flamethrower on fire shot, but we knew that we didn't have the time or money for it.
Right.
So I didn't want to be pitching new ideas that were as expensive. But anyway, so we changed those things. And then in the end, literally one of the last minute things is one of the agency guys I was working with, Max and Vince, they were like, when she throws the knife, I originally just had it hit a sign that said like props or something. They're like, what if it hits like a crate of pipe? They had all these insane ideas. What if she walks through, these 2 guys are carrying a plate of glass and she walks through it and it shatters. And
And I feel like you could have done the props thing, plussing it of like she throws it and then it knocks something over that destroys like an intricate prop.
Yeah,
that, like,
we had that was on our list. I even showed them a sample. Yeah, the guy that has like a tower of like 10,000 dominoes on top of each other.
Yeah. Or you do the champagne fountain.
Yeah. So I had that. I actually have like all these animated gifs of all these different intricate things that could be destroyed, but then they were like, what if it just hits a crate of pythons and it says, do not, like warning or whatever. I was like, okay. And then, and I guess that crate opens and then maybe pythons escape and maybe I get my tarantula moment at the end, except now it's a python. So that's kind of what we ended up with.
Which is, maybe a little funnier, honestly.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, the tarantula is like very Home Alone, and the champagne flutes is very like Mel Brooks, like, or Busby Berkeley, I don't know. Like, the other thing is I wanted every gag to feel like it made sense for an action movie behind the scenes. And because I wanted to shoot in a New York street to do like kind of a spider, like a Born Identity kind of action movie type of deal, or like just kind of New York streets, city streets. Yeah. And none of them were available. Everyone, Paramount, Fox, Universal, they all have them, but they were all booked. So we got European Street at Universal, which is where they shoot The Good Place, and then I kind of just nudged the whole idea to be more like The Italian Job, so we got like a Mini Cooper to park on the street, and we got like statues and things for extras to carry around in the background, and that's why I was actually ended up being excited about it. But I had all these techno crane shots, And they were like, just so you know, moving that thing on these cobblestone roads is going to be really hard.
Oh, yeah.
So we kind of changed it. I changed my whole shot list to like steady cams.
Steady stuff, yeah. Which is maybe better anyway.
And there was another part, one last creative part that we changed a lot was there was a part where she just talks about concussions and how 50% of people that get concussions don't go to the doctor. And there all this stuff in text on the screen that we ended up cutting. But one way to make it not boring was I was like, instead of her just standing there saying that, can we just put her on a golf cart driving and talking? And so I kind of, that was another big thing, was just adding this golf cart scene. And I knew that shooting someone driving takes a while, but we ended up just doing it honestly without tracking her, because we just have her yelling from the golf cart as she's driving towards us.
There you go. Then you're fine.
Yeah. And I think it really just helped add movement to the main part of the PSA that normally you would just have someone standing there and saying. And I felt like we had so much movement before and after that I didn't want her to just stop still. So those are kind of the big.
I'm really glad you brought that up though, because I think that's the thing that I overlooked. I've seen that spot a couple times and we've talked about it for weeks,
right? Hundreds of years.
And I wouldn't have thought of why you did that. I would have assumed that was just part of the creative, and it's great. And it's funny to think about how a golf cart is logistically so much easier than a bike.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, way easier.
Way easier, even though it's like, oh, you're adding a motor and this and that.
Yeah.
You had a stunt coordinator for the whole thing anyway. So
yeah, but I was like, originally I was going to have like a page or someone, like a studio backlot person driving her, even though I wanted her to drive, but we had so little access. I only got to talk to Rebel one time before the shoot. And that's like part of working with celebrities is you're like, a lot of times you're prepped with backup ideas because in case they don't like something. So I was going to have someone else drive her, and I had this idea that it says like reserved for Meryl Streep and for Meryl, and then she like takes the sign and throws it off, but everyone's like, we don't want to get in trouble with that. So
yeah,
yeah.
And the part of that also, it's like Meryl Streep can't be like, well, I know you're referencing me and you're in trouble for it, but moving into interfacing with celebrity talent, the notes oftentimes are like, I don't want to look like a jerk. Yes. I don't want to put someone down. I don't want to be violent. I want to be positive, even though
I'm causing chaos. Yeah.
I'm causing chaos, right? And similarly, like my spot is way less chaotic and much more positive. But like anything that seemed like you were putting someone down or something was out immediately.
Yeah, and that's a celebrity thing, because normal actors they'll be like, "Oh, that'd be so funny if I like push that person off the cliff,"
Yeah.
But a celebrity will be like,
"Yeah, should we add a kitten too? I'll kick it."
Yeah. So what we ended up changing it out to, and I think we might have come up with it on the day, was we just put like 4 coffees in like a coffee tray, and she just like tosses them off the golf cart, and then funny. We hear someone getting burned by them in the background. Ah! Hey, we talked about so many things in this episode so far, Matt, that hopefully are helpful. Please let us know at justshootapod@gmail.com. But we thought instead of cutting out half the episode, let's make this a 2-parter. So you just listen to the first part.
You're welcome, everyone. Our whole afternoon was sunk into this episode, but I think it's pretty great.
Yeah. And then we're going to have the second part where we talk about the shoot and post and the release of whatever you make. And I think there's some really good nuggets there. So stay tuned for part 2 coming out next week. And that's it. The music